Ta.
For many years on Radio 2, that was what you heard at 3 minutes past 2, and you knew exactly what would follow. It's my privilege to spend the next 2 hours with the help of some other familiar voices celebrating our dear friend, Mr. Steve Wright.
Radio 2. Now, Steve Wright remembered.
We'll also hear from Steve and try to do this in the way he would have done it. If you're listening live now on Radio 2, this isn't the programme you'd expect to hear at this time, so Steve would have explained what's going on. Radio 2 fact sheet in hand, he'd run us through the afternoon. It'll be Lisa Tarbuck from 4 p.m. She's got What Steve Meant to Me, a listener's special. And then at 6, Gambo presents Steve Wright in his own words. And for those of you listening on BBC Sounds, he'd let you know this programme is part of a special collection. If you search Steve Wright, you'll hear other programmes in our celebration of Steve, marking what would have been his 70th birthday. That was Steve, always trailing ahead, telling you what was happening, making it all sound so exciting, like you were with your best pal. Also, he was always prepared. He'd test his mic, he'd be told off by his engineer, Gary, for having his headphones way too loud, and then be impatient to get going. Right then, let's do this.
1 2 1 2 1 2 3 4 5 6. That's perfect. A bit more level on the turn. 1 2 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2. Can I start? Is that be all right?
You just don't keep squealing.
I'll try not to squeal. I don't mind the squealing, though. I know you don't like it.
It hurts a bit.
I know, but, you know, it's kind of... You remember, like, the way we used to, like, knock around the carts deliberately for atmosphere? I loved that. Hello, this is Topo Shishio. Here we go, then, Gary, when you're ready.
Steve Wright remembered on Radio 2.
We've got lots of people to hear from, running us through aspects of Steve's career, starting with Peter Kay, to tell us why I'm getting this wrong.
He told me that if you listen to his show in the afternoon, he never really used to speak much for the first half hour of his show, just play music, because he thought listeners were all talked out from 2 hours of Jeremy Vine's show from 12 till 2. I mean, who thought like that?
Luckily, we've just had 2 hours of music from Tony Blackburn, so maybe Steve would allow this, especially as his friend Bob Harris, a.k.a. Brother B, is going to take us back.
Steve and I first met in 1977, believe it or not, at a little radio station called Radio Thames Valley, which was run by quite an eccentric aristocrat called Neil French Blake, who had the most amazing accent. He used to say, "Steve Wright, you're going right to the very top." And of course he was right, Steve did. I mean, I remember at that time that Steve was doing a show with Mike Reid, and they called it the Reid and Wright Show. And Steve would take a microphone on a really, really long lead out onto the A4, because the station was situated just outside of Reading. And he'd flag down cars and put the microphone in the car to see if they were listening to Radio Thames Valley. If they weren't, he would lean into the car and retune their radio so that they were listening to 210 Thames Valley. I was doing a guest show on a Saturday afternoon, just a one-off, I thought, at the time. Just before 6 o'clock, this young lad came in carrying a big cardboard box full of tapes, reel-to-reel tapes, cassettes, old singles, bits of paper, stuff, just spilling over onto the desk. He put this box down next to me. "Oh, hi, I'm Steve Wright. Oh, hi, I'm Bob, you know." So I listened to him on the way back home, back up to London. It was genius what I was listening to. I hadn't heard anything quite like what Steve was creating since Kenny Everett, to be absolutely honest, because he had all these characters going on in this show. It was called the Radio 210 Club, So the idea of it was kind of designed as if it was taking place in a club. And so you heard all this music in the background and people talking, various different characters that Steve would be pretending to interview. It was absolutely brilliant. Steve and I became really good friends. We went to the Saturday Night Fever premiere together, I remember, and he used to come up and spend time with me, just sitting on the studio floor when I was doing the old Great Whistle Test. And he always called me Brother B. From the moment I met him, he always called me Brother B.
Nicknames or familiar names. That was such a thing with Steve.
It's all going off on Radio 1 with me, Dave Pearce, from 4 a.m.
Dave Pearce, 97 to 99.
Is that too dangerous, Dave?
Radio 1.
Now, Marky, because that's what he used to call me.
I mean, he used to call me Rich. He used to call you M. You know, very few people do that.
Steve would always refer to me as Tongy. That really stuck.
He would call absolutely everyone matey boy, whether that was someone from the office, a film star, a celebrity, a famous author. Somehow over the years, we all got aligned, and Tim and I knew exactly which matey boy he was always referring to.
All right, then. And me, personally, well, I was always Vern. Hey, Vern, is what you'd hear down the corridor. Hey, Vern, is what you'd hear when you walk into your studio. Hey, Vern, is what you would hear the first words when he would ring you up and have a chat for 2 hours. That was Steve. Now we'll have more from Len next after Steve recalls his first gig on Radio 1.
I remember following Tommy Vance on Radio 1. I had a Saturday night programme, and I thought, sitting behind me, in the studio behind me, is Tommy Vance. He's a legend, and here I am, a bit of a muppet, and I was absolutely terrified. And he finished with his lovely deep voice, his TV on the radio, and I came on with my very high voice. Hello, welcome to my first show.
It's 7:30, and now for the very first time on Radio 1, here's Steve Wright.
Thank you very much, Tommy. You okay?
Lovely.
What are you up to now?
I'm going to see Manhattan with Woody Allen in it.
Okay, have a nice weekend.
And you.
Ta-da.
Ciao.
Saturday, Steve Wright. Radio 1.
Back in the day, early 80s, I was doing a thing called the Sunday Hoot at Radio 1, which is when Noel Edmonds went on holiday for most of the year. My show would take over for like 13 weeks. But I used to listen to Steve and go, well, how do you do that? It seemed like he had 40 people. They were all clapping and laughing at everything he said. And he had all these characters, which is what I was doing. But it just seemed effortless. I remember asking him, tell me about your show and how does it work? And he just said, well, I love American radio. He said, I listen to American radio and I don't steal ideas. He said, but the vibe is important. I go and watch people doing things. And he said, a lot of the DJs over there, and this was a big thing, and this is way before we did it here, a lot of the DJs over there stand up. And I said, what? He says, yeah, they stand up. He says, and they gesticulate and they move in and out of the microphone. And some of them write stuff. And I only imagine this kind of weird Stuart Henry, Emperor Roscoe thing of you're talking to the listener at home and you're just making things up on the spot. And Steve made me understand that you can do more work than that. You can put more effort into it and have the show be something that you're proud of. And every day, he said to me, every link matters.
Radio 1 in the Steve Wright era was absolutely massive. I don't think you can quite comprehend how big it was. I mean, it was the closest that a DJ would become to being an actual pop star. I think the station had something over 19 million listeners a week. It was huge. And of course, we had the Radio 1 roadshows where we would tour the UK every single summer. And they were massive. They would range from anything from 10 to 80,000 people turning up at these roadshows.
Today, live from the Promenade Western Supermare with Steve Wright.
Good morning and welcome to Western Supermare.
I guess who remembers those early days?
I was 16. And the Radio 1 Roadshow was coming to Newquay, and it's the only reason I want to be there. You cannot overplay it. For me, I was a radio obsessive, very, very keen on Steve's show, but also, back in the day, that team of Radio 1 DJs were major league celebrities. Every single person in the country knew every one of their names. And Steve was basically the new kid in town. So I remember went down really early. It was like a Springsteen concert. There must have been 5,000 people on this beach. And I was in the front row. I mean, I was 16. I annoyed the 16-year-old behind me by being tall, so she started drawing on my jeans with a biro. I remember that. It's the kind of thing that happens in Newquay when you're a teenager. So Steve comes in, he starts the show. I'm just watching, thinking, I'd really like to do this one day, but I never will. And then this guy comes down to talk about the contest, which is called Bits and Pieces. Bits and Pieces was a music identifying contest. I then became a contestant. So Steve then said my name. He said, we got 3 contestants and Jeremy Vine from Team. So I'm suddenly then on the stage. And the mistake I made was this, is that the guy who won it got 10 out of 10. And then I came second with 7, and then someone else got 4. And I realised you've either got to get 10 or you've got to get 0. And I really regretted afterwards not getting 0, because it would have really made Steve laugh.
No, that's what Steve would later have referred to as just muppetry, proper muppetry. But he had such affection for him.
We used to have a character come on at the roadshow called Dr. Fish Filleter. And he can speak like that. I gave him a voice like that. Just threw out fish, dressed as a doctor in a doctor's outfit. Oh, the smell.
And then there was this with the Bee Gees.
Bee Gees are here today, and they're back, and they promised to do something for us then while you're here. Because I know you're coming on the roadshow with us next week.
Yeah. There's a light. But he would pick this one, wouldn't he?
Just do it.
Never shone on me.
Is that the key?
Yeah.
I want my life to be live with you. Live with you. There's a way. Everybody say to do each and every little thing. But what good does it bring?
More tea, Becca.
If I got you, ain't got you, baby, you don't know what it's like. Baby, you don't know what it's like to love somebody, the way I love you.
Yes. That's your real Bee Gees.
That's not where that came from.
The Bee Gees will be appearing with us next week with the Road Show. They'll be joining us on what day? You're coming Friday, aren't you? Right.
6 at Exmouth.
Oh, it's good to see you again. Thanks for coming in, Bee Gees. See you next week. Respect.
Right through the decades, he was always there for us, and the interviews were always humorous and silly, and he let us be silly. In fact, he was silly with us. That was Steve. Always fun and always spirited. We've done other interviews, but the only ones we really remember are the ones with Steve Wright. And those days, they're just more simplistic, but still sophisticated. Those days where there weren't so many recording artists. So it was nice to have that attention from someone like him. But I do remember that we jammed around the piano, and he was a delight. It's just a different world.
That's Barry recalling what happened after that roadshow appearance. They all stayed at the same hotel, and Steve got... This is so Steve. Steve got them to have a sing-along, like in his studio a few days earlier. It was Steve's favourite roadshow memory. This is Steve Wright Remembered, part of a series of special programmes marking what would have been Steve's 70th birthday.
Radio is a medium that I adore, and it's because of him, really. He gave one the sense of radio being an intelligent medium where you could have really good chat, really good conversations, but it was a place where you could be entertaining, frivolous. I remember the first time really engaging with the show was when I started working my year off, and I was just sort of drawn to Mr. Angry, and it was all the characters, and it was the zane of it, but it was purposeful. There was a lot of radio out there at the time which just went for the madcap, but wasn't underpinned by a real understanding of what the listener wanted. And Wrighty knew, I think instinctively, what a radio listener wanted, which was
to feel like a friend, to feel like a sometimes surprising but never intrusive presence. So I would spend hours kind of almost unconsciously listening to him kind of populate my ears with magic.
That kind of fast bullet point sort of comedy became a thing, you know, with the Fast Show and Little Britain and whatever, and Reeves and Morty, where this kind of like a character comes on and says their thing, and how long can you delay the gratification of them saying that thing, or what unusual context can you put it in? And even when that was sort of being rediscovered, that is kind of an old musical kind of thing almost, but even as it was being rediscovered by alternative comedians, Steve had already boiled it down almost to a postmodern format of just these people come in and it's that person and they've said their thing and they're gone. He was really good at comedy, and he had an amazing supporting cast of people helping him out there as well, so it was a great thing that he did there.
There used to be the phenomenon of appointment to listen, and what was thrilling about this cast of characters was that it was ever changing. Steve had a sense for knowing when enough was enough, and you knew that they weren't going to be there forever.
Now, just to say, on a technical note, Steve would have edited that whole bit out. No offence to Gambo, Stewart Lee or Sue Perkins, but he didn't approve of talking away comedy. And he was always surprised by the affectionate memories that people had of the characters on his Radio 1 show.
Now we're going to East Riding in Yorkshire and Caroline Sturgeon. She's not a medical sturgeon, are you?
Sturgeon, as in the caviar.
Yeah, we used to have a character on the old show when I used to work on Radio 1, and he was called Sid the Manager.
I know very well.
He was my manager, and he used to come on, yes, boy, hello, 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 I've been up to see the sturgeon. And I would say, you've been up to see the sturgeon, have you, Sid? He said, yes, I've been up to Dr. Sugary to see the sturgeon. Yes. And then he used to say at the end, hello?
Throughout his time presenting Steve Wright in the afternoon on Radio 2, not a day went by without a text or an email asking if the likes of Sid the Manager, Mr. Angry, the pretentious music journalist, or Nick and Cave were coming back at any time. And there's more about the characters in Steve Wright in his own words, which is on from 6 p.m. today or available now on BBC Sounds. Now, we can't talk about the 80s Steve Wright without mentioning
if you were at Radio 1 in the 80s, chances are that you'd be hosting Top of the Pops, which was the UK's biggest music show. Again, around something like 14 million people would watch Top of the Pops every Thursday.
Steve was always that guy with the semi-mullet and the big Groucho Marx moustache. Looked like Groucho or Leon Redbone. And he had I remember seeing him on Top of the Pops, and he had a kind of boating hat on, you know, like a straw hat on, and a stripy kind of jacket and white. He looked very odd. It's like he'd fallen into the windows of a posh shop in Jermyn Street and decided to go on Top of the Pops that afternoon. And I always admired him for that.
They used to have these canteens down there, but you couldn't use the big canteen because of no time. So they used to have these little carts at different floors. And I said, George, me and my mate are going down to Spud, you like, down at Shepherd's Bush. You want to come down? And he said, yeah, mate, I would, but I've got to rehearse. So it was a meeting that never happened.
That would have been truly a great showbiz moment.
Oh, yeah, good to see Boy George back in the charts. Right now on Top of the Pops, we're going to take a look at the top 10 from 10 right down to number 1, like this.
And back over on the radio, Steve was starting to have guests on his Radio 1 show.
I think the first time was with my colleague Hugh Laurie, actually. We both came in and we were both very nervous creatures, and we may not have seemed it because I suppose we carried with us an air of our unforgivable backgrounds of private schools and Oxbridge and all that sort of nonsense. But and I'm not asking for sympathy, but that made us all the more nervous because we felt like that was an embarrassing thing to be, and we wanted to kind of disguise it in some way. And also, it's not easy for, at least it wasn't for us, to speak naturally and relaxedly into a microphone on the BBC, particularly in the 80s. We'd grown up with these figures who were almost finger-wagging headmasters who were the great figures of radio. And it was at the time when he was just beginning to make a real reputation for himself. Mr. Angry and those characters were really beginning to impose themselves on the public consciousness, if you like. And this rather American, as it was considered, idea of having kind of a claque, I suppose is the correct technical word. In other words, a group of, who were they? Assistants, engineers, people in the studio with him.
Fry and Laurie in the studio with him. Okay, so I'm going to ask you some boring questions now, if that's okay.
Far away.
How did you two get together?
There is actually rather an interesting story behind this.
Thank goodness for
what happened was...
I know you've missed the bit where...
No, we'll come to that bit. But Hugh was in a room, remember, and somebody who knew you said...
That's right.
Come in, he said, there was someone called Thomas, and that's Rebecca, and this is Hugh. And I said hello, and Hugh said, what did... Good evening.
Something like either good afternoon or good evening. Something like that.
Very good.
And
then I had to go earlier. But that's
really how it seems amazing.
What a story!
So I was afraid because I was quite nervous. And so I thought he was going to be rather scary. I guess I conflated the idea of Mr. Angry and Mr. Wright as one person. I think he sensed it, and he was so kind and so enthusiastic. I thought, wow, he took pity on me.
So, if I think about Steve, I immediately see him sitting there, very dishevelled, very scruffy, but very funny, warm, naughty man. And in amongst it all that scruffiness belied a consummate professional, consummate broadcaster, who was always, in my opinion anyway, extremely well prepped. I was very impressed by that. Every time I went in there, both on my own and with Jennifer, he had always done the work. He knew what to ask, even if, I don't know, somebody else had read the book or he had or whatever, but he always seemed to know what we were there to talk about, and he was incredibly generous with that and inquisitive and curious in a proper, real, authentic way. But above all of it, I just remember all the joy, as a listener, never mind as a participant on his show. I just remember the joy of that proper zoo radio of so many different voices and characters and just making me laugh to my belly. Yeah.
I have shaven.
Yeah. Oh.
You have not.
I know, but
listeners.
I'm under a lot of pressure. I have to get up at 4 every morning.
Yeah,
and
so that means you can't shave?
Well, I'll have a shave in a minute.
Is there a bathroom here that you could have used just before I came in?
Did you bring the shaver?
I'm insulted. Well, I bothered.
No, don't be insulted. Let me just introduce you to everybody here. There's Nikki over there.
Hi, Nikki.
There's Ione.
Hi,
and
Ione.
there's Julie. And there's Richard. And Mick's around somewhere making some
there's
tea.
Mick down on the floor.
No, that's far. But that's another
where's
story.
Mick?
Oh, I don't know. He's
so
Polish.
even Mick hasn't bothered to turn up. So great. And I came here to see Mick.
We were looking forward to seeing you, actually, and now it's all turned horribly sour, isn't it?
Wrong, isn't it?
Now, that was from Steve's Radio 1 Breakfast Show days, and we'll get to that very, very soon. You see, Steve, I'm doing it. I am absolutely trailing ahead, making sure that everyone knows what's on its way. But first, on the subject of music, from the afternoons on Radio 1. Steve absolutely loved music, and there are certain songs that will always make you think of him. Now, even though he didn't set himself up as a music presenter, when he heard a song he thought deserved airplay, it got airplay.
The record company did everything they possibly could to find a way of not having the quiet bit in there. In the end, Steve Wright, he started playing the whole thing. And suddenly, it leapt up the charts. From the desert to the well, you have strayed upon the motorway to hell.
what comes to mind is Steve really breaking Caribbean Queen in this country, basically. As an artist, to have a DJ that's playing your record, I mean, that's really what you want, isn't it? You write a song, you create something, you know, people like it, and it starts with the DJs, getting it to the audience outside. And if the DJ likes it, that's half the struggle over. There's European Queen, there's Caribbean Queen, and there was African Queen. And they all sort of individually did, you know, something. But Steve picked up on Caribbean Queen, played it. Eventually, it was a very successful record. And I'll always be grateful for what he did for my career.
Chris Rea and Billy Ocean remembering how Steve was responsible for making their songs hits in the 1980s. And then, in 1990, this is how Steve tells the story.
Well, I remember being in Los Angeles in America, and you know the way you tune around radio stations. At the time, I was just tuning into KTLA and Kiss FM and all these stations, popular stations in America, in Los Angeles in particular. And everywhere I was listening to this song, Sacrifice by Elton John. It was a massive hit there. Well, at least I thought it was a hit there. And I thought, why aren't we playing that? So I believe I had a show on Radio 1 at the time, and I came back and I played Sacrifice, and people started phoning up and sending letters and all the rest of it, as it was at the time, and saying, what is that song? And I said, well, it's Sacrifice Elton John. And then I believe, and I'm not quite sure about the details here, they flipped it over because it was a B-side originally here. And radio stations then started playing it. Oh, my goodness, I believe it went to number 1, Sacrifice. And Elton John actually called me up and said, I thank you so much. I said, well, that's okay, I'm just doing my job.
But when Steve spoke to Sir Elton John in 2019 for his biography, Me, this is how Elt remembered it.
You know, it's so weird, Steve. I didn't want that to come out as a single. I didn't want to go on the album.
I know.
I mean, I've made that mistake a couple of times with Benny and the Jets and Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me, and Sacrifice was the rounding off the trio. So if it wasn't for You, Healing Hands was the single, and you flipped it over, and that was my first ever number 1 in England solo. If it wasn't for you, that would never have happened. Thank you very much. Don't forget those things.
Thank you for that.
It's a human sign when things go wrong, when the scent of her is two hearts living in two separate worlds, but it's now
Steve Wright remembered on Radio 2.
In 1991, Steve invited the Bee Gees into Radio 1 to record an interview one evening, which turned out to be a setup.
Okay, that was 1968. This is 1991. They were here before on Steve Wright in the Afternoon, and they're here again. My special guest are the Bee Gees. The Bee Gees are here.
Yes, despite the rumours, we're back. Yes. Oh my God! And the reason why I'm here, of course, is to say, gentlemen, the Bee Gees tonight. This is your life.
I don't believe it.
Steve was a fantastic person, very affable, very friendly, and the interviews were always great. A high humour man who enjoyed being on the air, and he was one of those people. He was the best. Enjoyed every minute of it, you could tell. And he was instrumental in setting up the This Is Your Life for us. It was literally just another interview, and the surprise was that we didn't know This Is Your Life was going to happen. So that was a special day, and for him to be involved in that and to help set it up, we wouldn't have expected him to do that. So that's really the prime moment for us with Steve. But it was just a typical interview, and then it all exploded.
This is Vernon Kay remembering Wrighty as part of this special series of programmes around what would have been his 70th birthday. Now, if we go back 30 years, there had been a lot of change at Radio 1, and Steve had moved to The Breakfast Show.
7:24, Simon Mayo at 9 o'clock this morning, 12 midday, Emma Freud including the Daily Debate, Newsbeat at 12:30, Mark Goodier's news show at 2 o'clock, Nicky Campbell at 4, Newsbeat at 5:30, 7 o'clock, the evening session, Lee and Herring's Fist of Fun at 9, Room 101 at 9:30, Mark Radcliffe at 10, 12 midnight Lynn Parsons, Bruno Brooks at 4 in the morning. Some traffic from Julie. What you got, Julie?
Emma Freud was a new recruit at 1FM, had previously worked a couple of streets away in London.
When I started working in radio, I was at GLR, Greater London Radio, and I was being produced by Chris Evans, and I'd never done a daily show before. And Chris produced it, and he taught me absolutely everything about how to present on radio and what it meant and what the possibilities were and where you could go with the comedy of it and what you were trying to communicate through to the audience and the role that you would have in the lives of the audience. And he said that he learnt everything that he knew from Steve Wright, even though he'd never met him, just from listening to him, that he was the gold standard. I think we might even have had a picture of him up in our studio. Neither of us had ever met him. And it wasn't just the tone of it or the richness of it. It was the thinking through, what do people want from this minute of radio? How's the best way to come off the back of that record? How do we come into the next at the maximum pitch, making it bigger than the sum of its parts? And we then asked him to come in and do an interview, and eventually he said yes. And I thought Chris, who was the most amazing but the cockiest and the most self-confident guy, he dissolved.
But Emma didn't find Radio 1 very welcoming.
I was the first of the new people that came in when Matthew Bannister took over, and everybody who'd been there for decades was very wary and very nervous about the new guard coming in, with two exceptions, which was Steve and John Peel, who were utter kindness.
Steve's friend Marky had got the same support when he joined Radio 1 a few years earlier.
I'd been listening to Wrighty on Radio Luxembourg, and in those days it wasn't that easy to listen to anybody who was on UK local radio. You actually sort of had to be in their locality. But Steve was a star of local radio and a star on Luxembourg, and he had already been absolutely massive on Radio 1. So when I joined, I'd been a listener and he was a hero and I was a fan, but he was extremely welcoming, which was, I think, how he was to everybody, all the newbies. He was really good to.
When I was first finding my way in radio, I spent a number of years on pirate radio and places like Radio Caister, which was a special radio station that we used to do at the big Soul Weekenders back in the day. And one of my real memories from that time is that I would sit and listen and study Steve Wright's radio show, his techniques, and try and bring some of what I learned into my own shows. It wasn't just the way that Steve spoke to his listeners, but Steve was also a master at production. His shows just sounded like they came from another place. They were on another level. So when I joined Radio 1 in 1991, I couldn't believe it. I was following Steve Wright in the afternoon. I was on a Friday night, 6 p.m. And Steve was always courteous, welcoming, supportive. I mean, really supportive. I'm most grateful for the way he used to build me up on a Friday, pretty much all the way through his show on a Friday afternoon. He'd be talking about me starting the weekend, coming on after him, and I'd just started on the station, and he'd been there for 10 years.
For Steve, that brief spell on the Radio 1 Breakfast Show wasn't his happiest time on the air, and unusually, it was something he did a TV interview about many, many years later. We might remember Steve as an interviewer, but he avoided being an interviewee, which is why the Steve Wright in his own words show is such an amazing listen. You'll suddenly realise I listened to him for all those years, but no, I just don't remember hearing him talking about himself. Back in 2010, Chris Moyles was the host of the Radio 1 Breakfast Show, and he presented a TV show where he interviewed many of his predecessors in the slot. I'll come to why Steve agreed to the interview after we hear from my good friend Chris Moyles and, of course, Steve. This is a bit of their chat.
Even though I'm totally dysfunctional in the morning, I can't, like you, Chris, I just can't get up at 4 o'clock and come in and entertain. And I think it was only mildly successful, really, my tenure on breakfast. It only lasted 18 months. It wasn't a disaster.
It wasn't a disaster.
It was just kind of okay.
Wake up every morning with Wrighty on 1FM.
By the time I took over the breakfast show, I was 39. I don't know how old you are, but that's
24.
24, so you're okay for a while. And by the time I was 40, I suppose people were kind of saying, well, Radio 1 really needs younger broadcasters. We're broadcasting to the sub-teens. And I'm thinking, well, I am old enough to be their father, so I better leave.
Steve left Radio 1 in 1995, but he didn't come to Radio 2 until 1996. In between, he did a show on the newly launched Talk Radio, and he also worked for GWR, a big commercial radio group. Tell us a story, Wrighty.
I was a consultant. I used to go around to the different radio stations and not tell them what to do, but on behalf of GWR, who owned the stations, I would go around and say, how about tweaking that breakfast show? How about doing this? How about doing that? And get them to amp up the creativity a little bit. Anyway, they said, we got this guy. This was in a station kind of quite north of London. They said, we got this guy, Chris Moyles, on the air at 7 o'clock, and he talks too much. And he's wild and he's crazy. He's out of control. So I had a listen. Oh, and he won't play the playlist. You know, all that kind of stuff. So I had a little listen, and I thought, let's meet him tomorrow's. So the day came where we were going to have this meeting, and I sat down, and the first thing I said, I think, was, love the show, don't change a thing.
And that was the start of a career-long friendship.
Steve Wright, remembered.
Steve spent his first 3 years at Radio 2 presenting shows at the weekend, plus a movie series and other various specials. Steve Wright's Saturday show was on 10 till 1, presented by Steve and his co-hosts, who included Richard Easter, who he'd worked with since Radio 1, and, of course, Liza Tarbuck.
In the early days, when we were at Hallam Street, which is the building that this new shiny building's been built on, and that was... I mean, you could still smoke in the studio at that point. You know, really, there was something quite rank about that time. But so it was myself, Richard Easter and Steve, and there was a lot of pressure on him to make that show the must listen, which, of course, it was. It really was. It won awards every year. And he knew how to engage an everyman audience from the beginning to the end, on the premise as well that people are listening who are busy. And it was an absolute pleasure to be part of that. He was an absolute master of pace. You know, like talking, if somebody came on and he dared to give them 2 bands, which meant that he was interested, but not as interested as a 3-bander. So if you've got that amount of talking, he would balance that with music. Or he'd come in with a quick bon mot. And within 3 hours, that's really important. But I think one of his absolute gifts was being able to understand what people he couldn't actually see wanted. And there's not many entertainers have that gift. But he really had it.
At the time, Radio 2 was going through a reinvention, which Steve was a major part of. As well as the baby boomer audience who'd listened to him on Radio 1, he gave Saturday mornings a more modern feel than the rest of Radio 2.
Well, now they're the hottest British export since the Beatles. The first 6 singles went to number 1.
Dun, dun, dun.
Did you know
And the 7th one went to number 2.
Yeah, I knew that. I was just testing. They're one of the archetypes of Cool Britannia. They're currently wowing audiences on the British leg of their world tour. It's sporty, scary, baby ginger and posh. It's the Spice Girls. How are you girls doing then, all right?
We're very well, thank you.
Good, it's lovely to see you all.
You too.
Now, how's it all going? How's the tour going? I mean, what's it like?
It's wicked. We're having a laugh going around the world. It's wicked.
Is it nerve-wracking for you?
I think the first few shows we were a bit dicey with the steps and, like, you know, some of the harmonies and stuff. But now it's like we've done about 25, 26 shows, so we sort of know what we're doing.
Oh, yeah.
But also, I think the first night at Wembley was a bit nerve-wracking, obviously, because we were back home and we had family out there and stuff.
You know when people criticise you.
I'm
shut up, 'cause all you wanna do is criticize.
Do you know what? You know, everyone said about this big backlash thing.
Yeah.
And I was reading in a book yesterday, and it said backlash, retaliation of something being threatened.
She gets everything from a book.
Now, and I was thinking, what the hell was us lot threatening anyway? Or mankind's ego or something for them to backlash in the first place?
Yeah,
I mean,
but
it's
I suppose
ridiculous.
for 5 women, especially to be managing themselves, some people will feel threatened about it.
Exactly.
So then they should go
so many mediocre boy bands round that actually don't even get any criticism at all, and yet you come in for loads of it.
Half the time we don't even read the press that we get, because if not, you'd be very big-headed 1 minute and then you'd be, a wreck the next minute. As long as we're happy with ourselves, that is all that matters to us.
That evolution of Radio 2 was overseen by new boss Jim Moyer. And to quote that famous online encyclopedia, he turned the station from a declining backwater to the most popular in the UK.
Hi, we're the Spice Girls, and Radio 2 is cool like that.
It is
cool. It is cool.
Now, here's Richard Easter, Colin Berry, Janey Lee Grace, and Steve Wright.
I remember really clearly meeting Wrighty at a Radio 2 function. It was at the Café de Paris in London. I was already presenting an early Saturday morning show then, and I'd heard that Steve was going to be brought in to do Saturday afternoon shows and then was going to move to weekdays. And I just went up to him at this party and said something like, I love your work, I'm a really big fan, and I think you should hire me. I'd love to work with you. And he laughed and said, OK, come and see us tomorrow. And that was that. And we started with a few weeks of Saturday afternoon shows, if I remember rightly. And then when the show moved to weekday afternoons a short time later, it felt very significant. There was so much expectation because, it's Wrighty and his daily shows had been legendary in the past. So I think everyone was wondering, what would he do? Would he have his zoo format? Would he have his characters? Would he reinvent himself and do something completely different? But of course, right from day one, he made it his own. He lived up to all expectations. And it really was amazing to be part of it at the beginning and then on for 24 years.
The Saturday show had been established as a stop-off point for interviews with people ranging from the biggest A-listers to simply quirky or interesting. And the 21st century version of Steve Wright in the afternoon was a place that old friends and new stars alike wanted to be on.
I'd grown up listening to Steve Wright in the afternoon with his posse. He was part of my life. He was just there like audio wallpaper. I love Steve's show. I love the format. I finally got to meet Steve, I think it was 2001, and we just hit it off immediately. He sent me some stand-up DVDs that he thought I'd like. Lewis Black it were. And we started to chat every now and again on the phone. And our friendship grew over the years.
I first met him when I was a guest on his show. I was there to talk about a musical I was in or an album that I had out at the time, and he always seemed pleased to see me, always so very hospitable. And he had a wonderful way of creating a very relaxed studio. He'd tease me with a naughty twinkle in his eye. And between the three of us, because Tim Smith would be there as well, it was always a warm and friendly and a very humorous 20 minutes or so, as I remember. I loved doing his show. I loved being there with them.
So it went from Steve being a voice who you adored to listen to, with all his chaos and joy and items, to suddenly being one of the items, to actually being interviewed by him. And the moment you did that, he was so good. When you arrived, you would be completely welcomed. There would be that feeling that he thought your bit was the best bit of that show, indeed the only bit of the show. He was unbelievably enthusiastic. I mean, I don't think he kind of liked my stuff as much as he said he liked my stuff, but he gave everybody the feeling that they were involved in the best thing in the world. But he also made you feel like a good friend does, that everything you're saying is interesting, that everything you're saying is fun, that everything you're saying is funny. So he was not only an incredibly sort of acute and professional interviewer, but he absolutely brought out the best in you, and he made it a gorgeous, gorgeous 20 minutes.
I was writing a book and I was between filming engagements in America, and rather than go home to England, I thought I'll I knew this hotel in Key West, which had a nice garden where I could sit and write this book I was supposed to be doing. And I think what happened was I was given an award, this amazing thought. It was one of those comedy awards in the shape of a joker. And part of the publicity for this comedy awards thing was doing a few interviews, and one was with Steve Wright. I remember the wonderful feeling, because it was the first one I did, of being surrounded by the kind of weird mixture of drunks who go to Key West to look at the sunset and drink tequila, and people who've come to celebrate Ernest Hemingway, to go and see his house, or the poet Wallace Stevens, or other more literary types. And it's a strange mixture, but mostly Americans, of course, and quite brash, full of shops with awful T-shirts that tell farting jokes or go on about beer, just really low-rent stuff. And then you put on your earphones and you hear Steve Wright's voice down the line, and suddenly you're home in front of a fire with a big, wet, panting Labrador. And it's wonderful. He stood for so much.
When I first met him to do an interview, I immediately felt comforted by him just saying hello to me in sort of the foyer bit. Like, his voice was just so synonymous with just radio broadcasting. But, having said that, I did not think that Steve Wright necessarily was going to be somebody that I gelled with. I remember going for the first interview and, just being like a newish comedian, going in to have a chat with him and thinking, well, this is going to be one of a number of interviews I do to promote this thing that I'm doing that I'm not really that proud of. And he told me the story since, that when I first walked in, he didn't think that we were going to have a great time. Apparently, I just got a sort of resting, indifferent face. And so I sat in the studio with Steve, and he started asking me questions. And what happened almost immediately is that I sort of fell in love with the way that Steve is, just the way that he would chat to me, the way that he asked questions, the way that he would laugh, the way that he would always have something to say to you that was over and above what would be in whatever briefing notes radio presenters get. He just was a very interested guy. And that first interview I had with him, I had such a laugh with him. He was so determined to give me a proper plug on his show that I remember leaving that interview and texting my agent and PR straight away and saying, whenever Steve Wright asks if we can come on the show, can we say yes?
Guests also loved what Steve would call shooting the breeze.
There's only one person I've met in my life who had the same sort of ability as Steve. That was sort of Barry Cryer. So you often walk into a room with Barry Cryer and we're just finishing off a joke or finishing off a massive anecdote, and then we'll begin another one. With Steve, it wasn't necessarily anecdotes, although he was a master raconteur. It was his, I suspect, attention deficient brain. That would mean he would be engaged in a sort of passionate inquiry on something, and the moment you walked in the door, you'd be dragged into it. So whether it was about a new breed of cat, or whether it was about the incredible sheen he'd managed to get of a particular cloth on a car, it didn't really matter. You'd get swept into his passions. But I also think, because he was so smart, I wonder if that wasn't a way of, A, levelling everyone. Because you never got the sense with Steve that he was looking over your shoulder to somebody more famous, ever. Wasn't his bag. But also that he was bringing everyone down to just a very relaxed conversational level.
Every time I went in that room with him and whoever else was there, the minute the mic was off, then we spent 3 times as long sitting there. Just catching up with stuff, or being a bit naughty, or gossiping, or just having a laugh about something. It might be that while you were sitting there, you heard a factoid. And so there was further conversation to have about that when the mic was off, to check it or to find out something or whatever. So it's just engaging. It was great to be involved with such a team of mates, if you like. I would look through the glass and see Neil, my PR chap, pulling his hair out and making faces because there was always somewhere else to be. But there was never anywhere else as much fun to be.
Steve Wright Remembered on Radio 2.
There's lots more to come here on Steve Wright Remembered.
This is Radio 2 on BBC Sounds and on your smart speaker. Play BBC Radio 2.
BBC News at 3 o'clock. This is Justine Green.
BBC Radio 2. This is Steve Wright Remembered.
This Here's me, Vernon Kay, continuing this special programme, Steve Wright Remembered. That first decade or so of Steve Wright in the afternoon on Radio 2 was a huge time for Saturday night TV talent shows. Now, in the early days, there weren't many shows for the new artists to stop by on Radio 2, but the big show was always the place you'd hear them.
So I go to America, I go to somewhere else, Australia or whatever.
She's there.
She's there. She's there. Records are on, and she's a star
Always there.
Who'd have thought that, Leona?
I know, not me.
Actually, I think it's what you wanted, isn't it? But you couldn't have dreamed of a better outcome, really, could you? I mean, it's all going exactly the way you wanted
It's definitely everything I hoped for and more. Coming out of a show and then releasing an album to then go on and be supportive globally is, that's everything you hope for.
All right, stop, collaborate and listen. Jedward's back with a brand new invention.
And what about the sticky up hair? I mean, when did you discover that would be a good thing?
I know, because we used to do running, and when you were running, you used to have floppy hair and you get sweaty, so we used to just gel it up into a spike because it was more aerodynamic, like a bicycle helmet.
Is that the real answer? Or is that a showbiz answer?
No, I don't know what's happening, okay? Not, guys, basically, one day, me and John, I never knew it was going to be a big deal, and I remember our mom was like, you better cut your hair, and then I remember John dyed his hair blonde once. He was the first person to do everything. He was the first person to gel his hair, the first person to be on every single phone network. Pierce my ears. Yeah, he did everything. I remember John's like, I'm going to pierce my ear, and the next morning I woke up.
We've got some JLS tour dates, and when I saw these originally, I thought, well, we've missed some of these, but in fact, they're December next year, 2013. How come you have to plan so far ahead, by the way?
Because this is going to be the biggest tour we've ever done, and we want to make sure that this is the biggest, the best, that people are going to come to a JLS extravaganza. They're going to have the best experience of their lives.
Who's last to get the moves for the songs? Who's last to get it?
Me or JB, to be fair. Yeah. Us and Arisha probably come from more of the dancing background, I would say. So me and JB take a little bit longer, but we get it.
Yeah.
I feel very humble.
Yeah.
It's taken me aback a bit.
And you find yourself on the Today programme in America or David Letterman or what have you, all the iconic programmes. It must be a dream come true.
Well, it's a dream come true. It's not bad for a wee wifey, is it?
Absolutely. Because I knew you dreamed a dream, didn't you?
Well, that's what the song said.
All right, favourite Girls Aloud ever hit?
Ooh, mine's going to be The Promise.
Yeah, mine
Promise.
Mine too.
Okay. You've got to pick something different, really.
I know. Let me just go really way out there. Sound of the Underground. I would like to choose Love Machine.
Okay, Sarah.
I'll give you another one then. Call the Shots.
Oh, good one.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Okay, I'll say No Good Advice.
Okay, so now when we're going to play, Tim?
See, I Can't Speak French. Play that.
Yeah, so do I. Hello, Niall. Is that you?
It's Harry.
Harry, what are you doing there? I thought we were going to talk to Niall.
He's here. He's on the other side of the room.
We're happy to talk to you both. So, how are you? How's Australia going?
It's amazing. The weather's really great. And the thing is, everyone who lives over here thinks it's freezing cold. We're out in shorts and T-shirts.
Since we last spoke to you, which was just months ago, what do you make of your unbelievable success, popularity in America and Canada and Australia? Did it take you by surprise, or was that always the name of the game?
No, that was absolutely not expected at all. We just feel so lucky. This opportunity was since everything's kind of kicked off again. Obviously could not have expected that at all, so it's been really great for us. We're having a lot of fun. We're working really hard and we're enjoying it.
Well, with the Pop Idol, of course, I was mentioning earlier on that we have to talk to them separately because now it's a little bit like a campaign.
It is. It's an election campaign with election battle buses, I believe.
Yeah. So let's first of all talk to Will. Well, congratulations. It's been a long, hard slog for you. How do you feel at this moment?
That's absolutely, what a welcome. I feel I'm just on top of the world.
Yeah.
Never been so happy.
So you're doing a tour?
Doing this tour, which is hard work, but good fun.
So you're not together, you're not touring together?
Pop Idol was a whirlwind just before the final. We were going around in these buses, me and Gareth Gates, and I came in to see Steve Wright, obviously already then a legend in my mind, even though I was probably sort of slightly stroppy student thinking everything's wrong with the world, and he was always so generous, and then we sort of really forged a relationship as a pop star and guest coming in to his show, and him always being super generous, super supportive, and super interested in the music. And so that was my relationship with him then, and for many years. I mean, my gosh, from 2002, over 20 years.
Steve was always proud of the breadth of guests you'd hear on the show, and even in his Radio 1 days, he'd done occasional, more serious interviews.
Welcome back. We're with the Prince of Wales, HRH. Prince Charles is with us today.
You can still listen back to Steve's 1993 interview with the Future King on BBC Sounds, where they chat about the work of the Prince's Trust.
Me and my producer at the time, a man called Mick Vilkoich, we went along to this very silent room. It may well have been the HQ of the Prince's Trust in London. And I remember at the very beginning of the interview, I said, right, can I just, almost disrespectfully, can I just explain a few things to you? So I said, well, this is going out in my programme, the afternoon programme, we play music and all the rest. He said, oh, yes, I know about that. So then I also said, it's going to seem like I'm projecting or shouting a bit. And then, quick as a flash, he came back to me and said, do you want me to shout as well? I said, sir, that won't be necessary for you to shout. You just do whatever you like. So he seemed happy with that.
He also enjoyed interviewing politicians and spoke to major figures from the past, future leaders, significant MPs, and a number of sitting prime ministers.
I think one of the difficulties of modern politics is how do you communicate with people in an open way and in detail?
But don't you think that these days, 2004, people are generally more confessional, aren't they? If they screw up, they'll say, I'm sorry, I screwed up. I made a mistake. And somehow the public respect you for that.
Yes, I think that's true, but it depends the context in which that happens, but I think that's true.
This is huge in here. Number 10 it's like the TARDIS.
It's very big. It looks fairly small from the outside, doesn't it? You see this familiar door and what looks like a rather narrow terraced house, but it is huge. It's on a series of floors and it spreads very widely. And I guess people don't generally realise that it stretches straight through into number 11 and number 12, and also straight through the other way to Whitehall. It is very large indeed.
You can go right in and have a chat with the Chancellor.
Absolutely.
Cup of tea, whatever.
Well, he's a good friend. It's been known.
You didn't go through a left-wing period then at university?
I get spasms of left-wing feelings. I was at Euro Disney the other day. And
really?
I was queuing, yeah.
What are you doing there?
Well, I was taking my kids to see the Space Mountain and all
You're
that.
You're not that Eurosceptic then, you don't mind?
No. Euro Disney's wonderful. No, I'm not. I love Europe. We were all queuing to get onto the Thunder Mountain. And there were these people who had this thing called Fast Pass. And they were going ahead of us. And I was suddenly filled with egalitarian rage.
Having worked with John Major, why did you suddenly leave politics and work for Carlton Television?
I wanted to get some experience outside politics. I joined the Conservative Research Department after university. I was writing speeches and articles and understanding policies and getting involved in politics, and I loved all that, but I wanted to go out to see the commercial world, to work for a successful British company, to learn some new skills and all of that, which I did for 7.5 years or so. I loved it. I learned a lot. Politics was still my love. I wanted to actually get out of the back room and get into the front room and try to change things and do things that I thought matter for the country. I wanted to be a member of Parliament. It's a vocation. I loved it. I mean, I really, that's why I went back. I think I did Steve Wright in the afternoon 4 times, 2 as leader of the opposition, 2 as Prime Minister, possibly more. It was one of those shows which I listened to as a teenager, and so when I was in politics, being asked to go on, it was a bit of a thrill, because, Steve Wright was someone you'd grown up with. And so the idea you're going to go and talk politics with him on his show, that was the first thing. The second thing you think of is you walked in and it always had this sort of very happy, upbeat atmosphere. I remember one of the first times I went to be interviewed by him. I said, what's this going to be like? And he said, well, you know the Today programme? I said, yes. He said, not like that. And that was sort of, that set the tone. Well, also, he was very good with politicians, I think, of saying, oh, never mind that boring stuff you were talking about this morning. What's it like? How do you feel? How do you get your family together? What's it like being Prime Minister? How do you live this life? He was very charming, very disarming, very humble about it. Because, the guy was a brilliant broadcaster, had this amazing record. He was quite good at getting under your skin in a nice way, in a friendly way, but often, therefore, you open up. I mean, it is true that if you go in too aggressively with politicians, the sort of shutters go up and you don't let anything out. Whereas actually, if you go for Steve Wright or I mean, even David Frost was very good at this. You know, you're a bit more disarming and frank, and you sometimes get more results.
Steve would be pleased with that reference to Sir David Frost. He absolutely loved Frosty and always referred to him as someone who could make things go. And note that Steve would always ensure he had the right theme or music to go along with a guest.
Here's an experiment. I see your clock up there. There was one occasion when I was interviewing during the presidential race in America, 88, Michael Dukakis, who was the Democrat candidate. And I asked him a question which was just, what's the best advice you've ever had in your life? I mean, not a difficult question, not a trick question. And he paused from now... I'm going to have to stop there. That's half of the pause. But if I let it go on any more, people will think the show's off the air.
You'll trip the transmitters off.
Yeah, exactly. But that was 12 seconds. He just paused for 26 seconds. And now that was a pause, of course, that you loved because it was so extraordinary and bewildering, and you didn't want to stop that pause.
Did you see the George Bush interview the other day where he was asked, kind of a typical Frosty question, really, what mistakes do you think you've made? If you saw it, did you know what he should answer? Did you know what he might have answered?
That's very interesting, because I did an interview with him and he was good in it. I mean, the people can disagree violently with him, obviously, but to say that he's dumb is ridiculous. I mean, you know, he is smart.
And their interest in American politics and government was mutual.
Radio 1 in the afternoon. We're here with General Schwarzkopf, storming Norman. You know Bush, I would imagine, reasonably well. It seems to us, watching these debates, that he's had it, basically, and that America is looking for something new. Do you think that is the case?
I don't think so. I think the president's very tired.
You watched that West Wing. How true to life was that West Wing?
Well, a lot of it was true to life in the following way, in that you have 5 subjects that you're doing at all times, and they interact with each other. It doesn't look that way inside the White House.
You don't talk that quickly as well, do you?
Definitely don't, and there aren't all those kind of glass offices and people running around. I did have to help them in a correction, because originally they had all the foreign policy decisions being made by the Chief of Staff. And they were actually filming around the corner from my house in Washington, and I said, you need either a Secretary of State or a National Security Advisor to make those kinds of decisions. So in the end, they came up with a woman National Security Advisor who began to play the role. So, and then I had, I must say, a very funny experience. I had an airplane conversation with the character Josh that was on the program. He was sitting behind me on the airplane, and the man ahead of me said, I can't deal with this. You're a real person, he isn't, and you're having a serious conversation.
Hillary, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask a very short 3-parter. So,
a short 3-parter.
No, and I know you will give me shortish answers, because you're probably fed up with talking about all this stuff.
Steve Wright remembered.
When Steve joined Radio 1 back in the 80s, he brought along ideas from local radio, which he still went back to, creating a much-loved feature.
I thought, what do people like to hear about? They like to hear about the news. They like to hear about things going on. They like a little quiz or something like that. And I thought, you hear a lot of those quizzes on local radio at night. I thought, well, I'll bring some of that to Radio 1, see if they like it. And it just went off the scale. They absolutely loved it. Got an upset on the big quiz. Oh, mate, I can't believe we have an upset on Monday. Sally, who was the champion, has got beaten by Joe. Sally, I'm sorry.
Oh, well.
Oh, well. Sally is from Lytham St Anne's, and Joe Tompkinson from Shetland mainland. Sally only got 4 and Joe got 6, so she's the winner. Well, now, Sally, I'm so sorry. Who do you want to say hello to before you go?
I'd like to say hello to Clive and to Alex, to my mum, my sisters, Alice and Michelle, and all my nieces who listen to your show in the afternoon on their way back from school.
Oh, that's lovely. Well, hello to them. And what did she go away with, Tim?
She gets to keep one of 4 prizes. Which one would you like, Sally? You can keep the Good Homes prize. That's tickets to the lifestyle show BBC Good Homes Live at the Birmingham NEC in June. You can keep the Sugar Babes prize, those 3 fantastic new Barbie Sugar Babes dolls, the Travel Fair prize, or the Holiday Books prize, all those Rough Guides 25s.
Well, we say rough, and then they're okay.
Yeah, they're fine. They're all brand new.
Holiday Book books, please.
You've got it. She's going to keep those rough books. Well done.
Thank you very much, Sally. I'm sorry you lost. I don't know what to say to you.
Was it Muppetry, by the way, Jess?
No, not at all.
No, it wasn't Muppetry.
Oh, I'm only asking.
Four's not Muppetry?
I'm only asking.
Hang on, definition coming.
Right, the rules of the big quiz, which were written by elders on parchment, state that if you come in and you have won once, you are not a Muppet.
Yeah,
because
okay.
Sally won on Friday, she is not a Muppet. I hope that clears
Is
that
she
up.
talking down to us?
Yeah, I like it though.
So do I. Do some more.
Yeah, hurt me. Make me write a bad check.
Sorry, Sally, you don't get a certificate.
Oh, well.
No, you don't. No Muppetry certificate, says Jess and the elders. Goodbye, Sally.
Incidentally, the big quiz was where he found future co-host Joyce, a.k.a. the old woman.
Calls are free from most landlines. Some networks and mobile operators will charge for these calls.
She came on as a contestant. Steve liked her manner and invited her to join the team. What a genius.
And you were always the hero, and she was always beautiful, and you had this idyllic life.
Excuse me, Steve, who was your butler? He used to be an old-time thug, didn't he? And I can't remember his
Lionel
name.
Standard.
Lionel, that's
Wonderful,
it,
wonderful
yes.
actor. Played Max.
So it was comedy as well as a mystery
A
show.
wonderful actor.
Sorry to interrupt,
He
Steve.
polished our stars beautifully. When they met, it was made.
5 days a week of Steve Wright in the afternoon and then Love Songs on Sunday. All the shows sounded amazing, and I think you'll agree his work was superb.
So I joined Radio 1 December 82, and by that time Steve was hosting Steve Wright in the afternoon, which I used to listen to regularly and thoroughly enjoyed, and couldn't understand how he could get so much into a relatively short period of time. And then in 1984, I took over the lunchtime show before Steve. I used to then see Steve every day because he would pretty much get into the studio the same time I got into my studio to do my show because he was busy. He had guests that he would interview. He was busy recording all his characters like Sid the manager.
The thing is, I mean, when we were doing afternoons on Radio 1, we used to still be recording Sid the manager at 4 minutes after 2, whilst the first tune was on, most days as well, because it used to take me, as I remember, 3/4 of an hour to clear up the studio after Simon Bates. And then we would have to write the material. I don't know why we didn't write the material in advance, but we wanted to keep it topical.
So whilst I was doing my lunchtime show, there was literally just a glass pane separating our two studios. He'd be in there with all sorts of chaos and characters coming in, coming out. Always give me a great wave every day, give me a smile. Sometimes he'd try and put me off. And I also used to really look forward to our handovers at the end of the show. An amazing character, lovely, warm, generous man. I leave Radio 1, Steve carries on broadcasting, I stop broadcasting. Fast forward 20 odd years later, I join Radio 2, and guess what? I would be covering for Ken Bruce in the mornings, and I'd look through the glass, and he'd be there from 9:30, getting ready for his show that wasn't going out until 2 in the afternoon.
To be able to do a 3-hour show every day is an extraordinary feat. 3 hours of radio, I do 2 hours once a week, and that's not an accident. So I don't do dailies because actually by Friday you're absolutely cream crackered. I like being of the standard, so you're delivering a strong show on a weekly basis. In my case, he was delivering a strong show every single day, and sometimes they were absolutely extraordinary.
The thing is, Steve was simply the hardest working broadcaster I ever met in radio. He knew exactly what his audience wanted, and he knew exactly how he was going to give it to them. His attention to detail was phenomenal, as was his professionalism, which was extraordinary. And I learned more from him, as did many other people, than from anybody else in my entire career. Now, he insisted on maintaining exacting standards on a daily basis, which wasn't always easy, but it was, I think, in large part why he was so successful for so long, and loved, literally loved, by millions of people. Should say also, it was a lot of fun. I mean, I laughed more with Steve than with anybody else throughout my entire career. We had some great times, whether it was at Radio 1 in the early days, throwing fish, I mean real fish, out into the audience at a Radio 1 roadshow as the producer struggled to control us and tried to tell us to stop. But hey, we were having fun and so was the audience. Or whether it was sharing a large vodka and orange with Keith Richards when we went to interview the Rolling Stones. And I always remember being in New York once with Steve for the Grammy Awards, and we did a series of interviews the day before the Grammys. And at one point, the interviews came to a stop and we wandered into Madison Square Garden. We were doing the interviews just outside. And we wandered into this iconic stadium and it was empty, apart from a couple of people mooching around and somebody maybe rehearsing for the following day's Grammy Awards. But we sat there and it was surreal and it was just wonderful. And we kind of looked at each other and we kind of both said, how lucky are we to be doing this? And there we were, entirely alone in Madison Square Garden in New York. I always remember that.
Don't worry, Tim. I wasn't going to let that time with the Stones go unmentioned. It's my fondest memory of Steve, and it's when I was doing a T4 trip to meet the Rolling Stones, and Steve and the team were also on this trip. It was kind of one of those things where everyone gets together, and the Rolling Stones were doing what's called a junket, where you sit opposite each member of the band, and you have a minimum of 5 minutes, maximum of maybe 20 if you're lucky. And we were on this team trip together, myself, Steve and the afternoon show team, myself and our T4 team, and we went out for dinner. And I'd grown up, the son of a trucker, listening to Steve Wright. My dad always had Steve Wright on the radio, and we would always laugh and giggle about the characters. And being a young lad, I didn't necessarily know what the characters were talking about. I didn't necessarily understand the topic of conversation that the characters were talking about. But my goodness me, did I know the Rolling Stones via the Steve Wright show. Yeah, it's all right. Hi, you're listening to Steve Wright in the afternoon. All of that. It was superb. So I took the opportunity, plucked up a little bit of Dutch courage, and I said to Steve, would you mind if I phoned me dad and you had a chat with him? And obviously Steve, being the gentleman that he was, no, absolutely, mate, get him on. So I phoned my dad, I'm in Stockholm, I'm about to interview Mick, Keith and the boys, but I'm with Steve Wright. No, you're not. Yeah, I'm with Steve Wright. Oh, get out. And he wants to have a chat. What? He wants to have a chat. And then Steve beautifully snatched the phone from me at the right time, and as always, again, hi mate. And that was it then. For more than an hour and a half they were chatting. And my dad, you know, you'll find if you've met someone familiar to you in the media, you somehow tell them about their career. So I get people come up to me and we talk about Family Fortunes and we talk about Splash, for example, and T4 and Radio 1 and those iconic Ibiza days. My dad did exactly that with Steve Wright. And I think it got to the point where Steve was having his own flashbacks of all the characters that they'd created on the radio show because my dad was doing impressions of them all. It was such a beautiful moment for me, and it's something that I'll cherish because two important people having a chat together and me being the kind of mediator of it all was fab. And when I joined Radio 2, Steve and I spoke about that moment a lot because I'll be honest with you, we got a little bit drunk.
And Tess Daly is to quit SMTV when her contract expires next month, according to reports. The children's presenter is set to wed T4 host Vernon Kay. And Vern, our mate, Vern was on the Rolling Stones trip with us. He was there, and he was phoning Tess all the time. They're in love, you know. Okay, thank you very much for all of the... it's true. For all of the communication, especially about the Stone stuff, thank you very much for all of that. There'll be more of that coming up in about, 15 minutes' time.
I've been holding out so long, I've been sleeping all alone, Lord, I miss you. I've been hanging on the phone, I've been sleeping all alone, I won't kiss you. dog. People think I'm crazy. Stuffing on my feet, shuffling to the street, asking people, what's the matter with you, boy? Sometimes I want to say to myself, sometimes I say,
Hello there, I'm John Alderton, and I used to be in Please Sir.
Oh, not now, Steve. I'm trying to do this tribute.
I mean, I had a theory about Steve that he never left the studio. You would arrive and you'd sort of feel, wait a minute, he'd been here since the last time I was here. Do you know what I mean?
That's in part because Steve rarely broadcast from anywhere that wasn't his studio. We've got a couple more recollections to come of special outside broadcasts, but let's focus for a moment on Wogan House. For many, many years, Studio 6B was the home of Steve Wright in the afternoon. There were sofas, there was a coffee machine outside it, and by day you'd find guests there who'd just been on Zoe's show, or were booked for Jeremy's show, or waiting to chat to Steve. But it was also a place where he loved having a catch-up.
I would always look out for Steve when I came into Radio 2, and he would always have a chat with me. I remember I was going in to do the hip-hop show, and he came out in this kind of shoe kind of slipper sock crossover things, and he sat down next to me, started having a chat with me, and I said to him, Steve, I absolutely love those shoes. And he said to me, I think you should get a pair. And I said, what? And he said, yeah. He said, get a pair. And then he started telling me where to get them from. Then he started checking in with me as to whether I'd got the carpet slippers or not, the sock slippers. I'm ashamed to say I never bought them, but I am going to now.
When I was doing the Golden Hour on Friday evenings, I used to go into Steve after he'd come off the air, and we would talk absolute rubbish for around about a half an hour to an hour. Then normally around about 6 o'clock, he had to go home to take deliveries of his groceries. But he was just great company. He loved radio. I love radio. And we used to talk about radio in America and radio over here, and we had a deep love for radio, and the conversation always, whenever we were together, always came back to radio and jingles.
I would talk to him and he'd say, I've got a great idea for a TV show, for a radio show, for a song I should record, for somewhere I should go to. Whatever it was, Steve was always brimming with ideas, with creativity, and wanted to share them. And God, he was funny, self-deprecating, and and ultimately a great friend and colleague. And that's what you want. You know, we always go on about the Radio 2 family. Well, if ever there was the eccentric uncle, that was Steve Wright. He was the eccentric uncle that you want to hang out with at the wedding at Christmas time. He was just a smashing bloke. And so creative, so talented.
I remember walking into Wogan House, and it was just before I started Radio 2, and I was by the coffee machine that we had over there, and he came up to me and went, hello, Rylan. And I was like, oh, hello, Steve Wright. I was like, oh my God, Steve Wright. And he was just so, so lovely to me. And he always used to say to me, if there's anything you need to know, if there's anything you need to ask me, don't hesitate. Never worry about asking me anything. And he always used to be in his pinstripe suit. He had his tie. And I remember in his studio as well, we always had his ties hanging up on a rack so we could always change them at the drop of a hat.
There'd be times when I'd be around Western House, the home of Radio 2, and after his show, Steve Wright would just love to hang around and chat, to talk about radio. And he was a huge fan of radio and an amazing hard worker on his own show. I mean, he used to get him for a show that started at 2 o'clock, often at 9:30 in the morning. But there was a lovely memory when he said to me once, he said, would you like to come out to dinner at the RAC Club? And I thought, what on earth is Steve doing as a member of the RAC club? Anyway, I said, yeah, that'd be very nice. So one night we went down to Pall Mall in London, where all the very posh clubs are. I went into the RAC club. They had to lend me a tie and a jacket, and we had a very nice evening, and Steve picked up the tab for dinner that night, and we had a really enjoyable evening. I miss him so much and can't believe he's not here.
If Steve didn't see you on the 6th floor, he might give you a bell. So when I got the chance to sit in for Steve when he was on holiday once, and prior to me sitting in his hot seat and putting his fader up in his studio, I got a random phone call from a number that I didn't recognise. And, hi mate, it was Steve. How are you? And then, as every conversation goes with Steve, you get straight into it. There's no kind of, how's the cat? Is the dog all right? Has your car been MOT'd? There was none of that. It was straight at it. Right, mate, just enjoy yourself. Get in there. Tell the audience what you're doing. Enjoy the music. Tell the stories of the nation and just enjoy yourself. And then we would carry on the conversation for another 2 hours. So from that moment on, what would happen is whenever Steve would phone me, I would have to say to Tess, I'm out of action for a minimum of 2 hours. And I would go and sit at the end of the garden. We have this ornamental bench. It's a bit rotten now, but I think it would be the last time I sat on it was when Steve phoned me up. The last time, quite emotional actually, thinking about that. We chatted for ages, for more than 2 hours, and we just talked about life. We talked about mainly radio, because he was obsessed by his art. He was obsessed by radio. He was obsessed by the medium of broadcasting to such a large volume of people through one singular microphone, which reached the whole of Great Britain. And it was always inspiring to sit and listen to him chat and give advice, which is what he was blimmin' good at.
He'd always call, but he'd rarely ever say hello. He'd start the conversation mid-sentence like we were already having a discussion over the question like, do you think that Planet of the Vapes is a good name for an e-cig shop? Or, do you know you can buy bacon frazzles on eBay? Really random stuff. He were pretty eccentric, Steve. We worked together, sadly for the final time when we recorded a Christmas special last year. We spent a lot of time on the phone chatting about it, and I'd call him, and as usual, he'd always be lay on the couch watching episodes of Columbo on 5 Star, and we'd talk.
So we kind of mutual, slightly kin spirits, because he's a bit of a soul boy, I always say. He loves his soul music. And one day, and I don't remember if he had my number, if he found it or got someone, he went a long, faluted way to get for us to speak to each other. And I think someone contacted me, Steve's looking for your niece, you call Steve. I can't remember if I called him or he called me. But it took a while to get it together. And we got the call on, and he says, hi, Trevor, yeah, Steve. And I said, yeah, what's up, Steve? He said, you played a tune on your show yesterday. And honestly, I was scratching my head. We sat on the phone to each other trying to work out what this tune was that he really liked. And I thought, can't he just go to BBC Sounds and see the list? But no. We tell our listeners to do that, but yet Steve doesn't do that. Steve's so analogue. He had to hear it from my mouth. And I remember what the tune was. It was Chic, Real People, which wasn't a Chic big hit single. It was an album track. And I love it. And the fact he liked it really justified me playing it. It was just, that sums up Steve. It was funny. I like having these sort of conversations. Very rarely do you have these sort of conversations with fellow DJs, talking about tunes that you played that they really want to hear. And he clearly wants to play it himself, which is just flattering to me. So, no, Steve was, he was a one-off. Absolute one-off.
And behind the scenes, Steve continued to support new presenters when they came to Radio 2.
I remember when I first joined Radio 2 and I felt very, very shy and kind of out of sorts and didn't really know my place there, and it was all a little bit overwhelming. But there was one person who went out of their way to make me feel welcome, and that was Steve. He used to make a point of coming into the studio, and he loved to gossip, and I'm sure many people will be saying the same thing, but he loved just sitting there and chatting, whether it was talking about people, celebrities or maybe radio. You know, he loved radio with a passion, and I do too. And so we just would chat about every aspect of radio and being on the air and our listeners and what they meant to us. And I learnt a lot. I learnt a lot from him. More than anything, I learnt to take care of people, because that is what it felt like he was doing. He also absolutely loved new music, which I don't think people properly appreciated, but he would always come in and go, oh, I heard that thing that you played the other day. I played it on my show. And I'd be like, that's great. I'm handing on the baton. I absolutely love that, Steve. So he would play loads of the things that we were featuring on our show. He picked up on new bands and he wanted to spread the word about those new artists because he cared. He really cared very passionately about people and music and radio.
I got a sort of even more of an insight into Steve when I started DJing on Radio 2, and I would fill in for Joe Whiley, lovely Joe. And what was so amazing is that we would talk, because his show would finish, it would be Sarah's, but he would hang around and we'd have a chat. And then what was extraordinary is he would then stick around and come into the studio, and he started giving me tips, because I was learning how to work the desk, or drive the desk is the lingo. And he just kept on giving me more and more tips, and I just thought it was so kind. I was so moved by his generosity. So I sort of got to know Steve in a different way, as a colleague, actually. But he didn't need to do that. And you know, he'll always have a place in my heart.
After I became a presenter on Radio 2, he'd offer up snippets of broadcasting advice to me, such as, you haven't got to reach at the back of the stalls, dear, meaning that I could pull back my voice projection, because this was radio, not theatre. I couldn't help it. It was just my genuine enthusiasm, trying to communicate with no one visibly there. I wasn't used to that. I was used to seeing a theatre full of people. It used to make me laugh because it didn't stop him. And whenever I was at Radio 2, I'd see him through the glass, because our studios backed onto one another, and we'd always give each other a cheery wave and make silly faces at one another like children. I don't quite know when it started, but he obviously felt he could affectionately mock me on Sunday love songs, mimicking my voice. I took it in good heart, because as the saying goes, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
I have to mention the impressions and the new character bits, which were part of his afternoon show on Radio 2. Now, in the early days, he had Mitch Ben, a.k.a. Ask Elvis. You'll be reminded of that with Gambo later on in Steve Wright in his own words, isn't that right?
I shall endeavour to enunciate.
Alan Bennett was someone who Steve adored in real life, and he also loved John Culshaw's take.
What kind of music is this, Steve? Have you got any dubstep?
That was one of a few voices that John did on the show. Now, Steve first got in touch with Lewis MacLeod from his Donald Trump impression, and then discovered Lewis could impersonate one of his Radio 2 colleagues.
This is where it gets almost hard to... Anyone who doesn't know the situation is not going to understand. He brings on an impressionist who's so good... he even fools my own kids. So Lewis MacLeod starts to do this impression of me, which is so good, I start to sound more like my impression than I do. Then I get emails and letters from listeners who think it's me. So I've got 2 young kids at home, and now I'm getting it in the neck for apparently staying on after my show to make silly jokes on Steve Wright. And then the full madness happens when Steve says, can you come in and do an impression of Lewis MacLeod doing an impression of you? And I remember thinking, I can't get my head around this. And I'm sitting in this, and Steve is like, no, it's not like that. It's like this.
Oh, it's Jeremy.
Hi, this is Jeremy Vine. Today's big question.
Sorry, Jeremy, can you do, hi, this is Jeremy, like
yeah,
he
yeah.
does it.
Okay, no, it's fine. It's brilliant. This is brilliant.
This is embarrassing. I'm teaching you to do you.
No, this is good. This is so funny.
Okay, go.
Keep the tapes rolling. Okay.
Go.
Hi.
No, bit louder, a bit more attack.
Right. Hi, this is Jeremy Vine. Today's big question. Am I the real Jeremy Vine, or is this a feeble impression? Is it my birthday? And if so, text or email now at mindsapine. Do you remember top@ggo.com? Who are the Magnificent Seven? Org la 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 la.
No, because you go...
Okay, right. Oh, I see.
Or just do .org la 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 la.
This is so brilliant. This is the maddest thing I've ever done in my whole career. And it's only, 11:30? Okay, here we go.
It wasn't just the recording session that Steve oversaw. He also wrote a lot of the material and would then record it as a rough guide on an old-style dictaphone to be typed up into script.
Hi, Steve, this is Jeremy Vine. My mother taught me about contortionism. Will you look at that dirt on the back of your neck?
There was always plenty of comedy.
Call me.
Steve loved making listeners laugh. He was the first broadcaster who was really, apart from Kenny Everett, he was a comedian. And people don't realise what an hard-working comedian Steve was, because he kept listeners laughing day after day, year after year for decades. And his output, when you think about it, was enormous and consistent. He just had this ability to make you feel happy and comforted.
Now, we all know Steve loved comedy, both people who did it and the process. And because of that, a summer couldn't pass without putting a spotlight on the Edinburgh Fringe. He'd talk to the people who were going, he'd do a preview spot, do a bit of a listening some days, and he even took the big show to the BBC's Blue Tent in Edinburgh for the day. Steve's lineup of guests included one of his absolute favourites, Stewart Lee.
He was like someone really good in a double act or an improv team. In fact, the people he had with him, in as much as they would set you up to get the laugh, right? And when I've been on panel shows, because I'm a good little nice middle class boy, I tried to do that for other comics. I would give them a feed line or a setup, and then they would like triumphantly get the laugh and look at you as if they'd beaten you or won some kind of point off you. But he wasn't like that. He understood that it was for the good of the greater whole. He would feed you things that you could do stuff with in a really supportive way, and also he would intuit what you would be able to pick up on. So he was great. At the back of his mind, he'd clearly got a map of where he was trying to get to and how he could set you up. And because he did it so well, people listening didn't appreciate how good he was at it.
Stewart Lee! What have you done? I have never... I've been on countless radio shows in this tent over the last decades, and I've never, ever seen anyone look remotely as if they're enjoying themselves in the audience. Steve Wright and his posse created an insane party atmosphere in a venue that is generally regarded as an unplayable kiss of death. I don't know what he has done here.
But the important thing is, do you approve?
It's amazing. Normally it's like going to sort of morgue coming in here, and you have to try and be funny to miserable people in silence.
It's my favourite time of working with Steve. I mean, it was really good times working in radio. It was a moment to see Steve in an environment that I hadn't actually seen him really working in. On stage, there was this anticipation from the audience. You kind of felt it, and I've been in those radio tents for a long time and seen lots of work, but there was this kind of palpable sense of something's about to happen. And then Steve came onto the stage, and the audiences were so excited, and I hadn't expected that. I don't know why, but they were really extra excited. I mean, we were there at the biggest arts festival in the world because we had a radio listening audience as well. He just made it relevant in a way that I hadn't heard anyone else make it relevant. And especially for new artists, I mean, Edinburgh is about new work. And even if you've got returning great names, he kind of gave them a platform which was comfortable and safe. And it was just fantastic. It really was just a romp through the Edinburgh Fringe and its importance and its excitement and its relevance across the world. It just really was great radio. And I know he was a little bit nervous before he went on stage. You could see that. But he always had Tim with him and he knows his stuff. And to see those two work together, it's a bit like seeing Eric and Ernie. It was wonderful to see them work the crowd. It was wonderful to see Steve come to life in a way that was different from the studio. To see the Ringmaster in a different show was a really great moment for me because we did it every day in the studio, but to see it live with the audience and get the feedback from the radio listeners back home, it was a great moment too, a great bit of radio.
Steve even took DJ Silly Boy along for a bit of an audience participation, serious jockeying, obviously with no G.
Serious jockeying.
It's 4:15 and time for a mini serious jockeying, no G. And to that end, I've hung up my headphones just for 10 minutes or so, and Tim's gone into the audience to perhaps, maybe somebody wants to do some serious jockeying. Now remember, there's no G. Okay. They have to have a DJ name, right, and they have to be able to read out dedications and and say stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think I've got some serious jockeying personnel here, including this is DJ John from Edinburgh.
Hi Edinburgh, I get a shout out to Ian, Nigel and Brad at Bradbury's. We're having a busy day at our goods and warehouse doing some serious restocking. No G, from Big T, you're on serious jockeying. No G.
I've got Dan, DJ, Top Man Dan, originally from Watford, now from Selkirk.
Yeah. I'll actually go under the name of Desperate Dan.
I can see that.
The birthday man, how about that? Heinz 57 today.
Happy birthday.
Happy
what you got in front of you?
You want me to read that out?
I wouldn't mind. We're only here till 5, then it's bingo. Hurry up.
Bit more energy, love.
Hang on, I've got War and Peace here. If you love the jockeying and our bit today wasn't enough, you can download and enjoy it for up to 30 days. Yes, that's 30 days, Steve. Just go to the BBC iPlayer radio app and search for serious jockeying. What we're going to say? No G!
We love that. That's very
Lynn
good. Very good.
is from Nottingham.
Yeah.
She's up some serious jockeying.
Hello, Edinburgh. Can you give a mention to James, Nikki and the Eton posse, just back from a week of canal boating in Germany? Serious lock-in, docking and mooring. You're on a serious jockeying, no G.
And finally, he says, running down, and finally, what's your name?
Adam Pacey.
What have you got to say, Adam Pacey?
Oi, silly boy Steve, drop the G and do some serious jockeying.
You got it! You got it! Let's pump up the jam or something.
This is Steve Wright Remembered on BBC Radio 2.
There are so many things about summer that you could set your watch by on Steve's shows.
In my memory, I do this item every single year at this point, OK? You can almost read along with me. Tim Henman suffered another desperate Wimbledon disappointment as he came back from 2 sets down, only to lose in the 5th to Spain's Feliciano Lopez. Tim Henman out of Wimbledon. So as I mentioned, it's British summertime now. Officially began this morning as the clocks went forward by 1 hour at 1 a.m. And that's where the Radio 2 newsreader reads the news 3 times, I think. Not really. That means we lost an hour of sleep, in fact, last night. We do now get an extra hour of sunlight in the evenings. The idea of daylight saving was first proposed in 1895 and was first... Petra Trelawney and Katie Derham are here, and we're going to talk about the proms. This is exciting. We do this every year. Yes, we do.
We love it, though.
Katie Derham, oh, yes, is the presenter of BBC Radio 3's Afternoon on 3, which I don't hear, obviously. And
I don't like to think there's any rivalry going on here at all. Come on, Steve.
No, you're right. And Petra Trelawney is the presenter of Breakfast and Live in Concert, also
which
on Radio 3.
Which I know you wake up with every single morning.
Every single morning. No, I actually have heard you, because I flick around the network.
Forget about that, Chris.
Something I always admired when I came into the studio to talk about the proms to Steve was his sheer ease and ability in the studio. He really was the master of it, of being able to make everybody feel included, of being able to keep us of a light touch but deep knowledge, and also delighted to give us plenty of time to talk about the proms. He was obviously a huge fan of the proms. It wasn't necessarily some of the music maybe that he would play regularly, but he was hugely enthusiastic about different music, and he loved the whole element of this great festival that the BBC did. He loved the BBC, so of course he was a huge fan of that too, and hugely generous with the time he gave. And he would just be saying, yeah, I want to hear more. Give us some more names, give us some more musicians. And it was great. Really a pleasure to talk to him about it.
I could easily spend another 2 hours looking back on the elements of the big show, all the stuff that was in it and the way Steve made it sound so effortless. But Liza's up soon with Your Memories. Steve Wright in the Afternoon ended in 2022. However, Steve's simple idea for Sunday mornings continues to this day.
It is the simplest format ever. Literally play some well-chosen songs from across the years, throw in some readers' letters and dedications, but Not just, oh, say hi to my husband, please. Much more of a heartfelt, detailed letter, many of which made me cry on air. Presenting that show literally restores your faith in love. I mean, if anyone was feeling disillusioned, then just to listen to some of the tales of enduring love and love against the odds and friendship and remembrance and forgiveness is all there. It was a real privilege to present that show. I know how much it meant to Steve, having that show on the air week after week, and I'm really grateful to him for putting me up as a debt presenter. He was really a very generous guy, and if he could give someone a leg up, he would.
It's extraordinary when you think that the idea that Steve had for a radio show concentrating on love songs and reading out dedications and getting to know the listener is nearly 3 decades old. It was a great idea. It's a timeless idea. And it became appointment to listen. Radio, Sunday morning wasn't right unless you got up, got yourself ready. Maybe you were in the car, maybe you were cooking the breakfast, maybe you were just couched up in the bed having a bit of a cuddle with the person that you love. And there was Steve, and there was this extraordinary playlist that he had because he knew music better than anybody. And we didn't want to muck about with it because what Steve came up with was a faultless idea.
Steve kept busy with new ideas and shows. Because Wogan House was being closed, Steve relocated to the BBC's Maida Vale studio complex, which he'd frequently mention on his shows.
Here's what we got. Live from Radio 2 Maida Vale, soft rock, contemporary chill, summer hits, tunes from the summer of love, songs that you know, and occasional surprises. We're saying every night, it's not a format, it's mood.
Steve Wright's Summer Nights.
It's a legendary building, which he came to love.
It was so funny that Steve loved Maida Vale with a passion. It's obviously somewhere that I know very well. You know, I've done so many sessions, and I never expected to have weekly catch-ups with Steve Wright and Maida Vale. I mean, I saw him there more than any band that I've ever interviewed, I've ever done a session with, and it was just so lovely. I used to look forward immensely to getting there, kicking him out of the studio, because he'd always run over, and I'd be like, "Oi, I'm on air in about 20 minutes time," and he'd be going, no, all right, I'll be with you, and he was just tinkering away, making his show, doing his craft, and then we'd have a catch-up, and he was so passionate about that place. He loved the history of it, the heritage of Maida Vale, and I felt like it was a sanctuary. I think it was a sanctuary for him. That's where he loved to go, he loved to be with all the SMs that, you know, he worked with on Radio 1 back in the day. They were the engineers. And so Maida Vale meant the world to Steve, and those people who worked at Maida Vale, he meant the world to them as well.
We'll finish with a very personal memory from BBC Maida Vale in just a moment, but I'd be doing Wrighty a disservice if I didn't do all the promotional stuff properly. This has been Steve Wright Remembered. Our thanks to everyone who contributed. We've felt the love and affection for Steve from everyone involved in this special programme. And to hear more from our celebration of Steve, marking what would have been his 70th birthday, please search Steve Wright in BBC Sounds. We'll end this show at Maida Vale, which is where I was on the morning following the announcement of Steve's passing. We were there with Lisa Stansfield for her performance in the Radio 2 piano room with the BBC Concert Orchestra. And the BBC Concert Orchestra had worked through the night and morning so that they could end the show with this tribute.